Ready? Okay, I'm going to use that clock.
Kathy, how are you supposed to log into these again? It's on the login page, and I think last time I was. Say it again. So I click on me.
I'm going to call this meeting of the Mountain View Westminster School District Board of Trustees to order at 6:30 and ask for a roll call.
Stephen Nelson.
Greg Coladonato.
Ellen Wheeler.
Bill Lambert.
Jose Gutierrez Jr.
Let the record reflect that all 5 trustees are present. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move to approve the agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by trustee Lambert, seconded by trustee Gutierrez that we approve the agenda. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Move on to item 2, opportunity for members of the public to address the board concerning items on the closed session agenda. Seeing no members of the public in attendance, I'll adjourn to closed session at 6:31. There he is.
for agenda online. Is it?
Kathy, what was the?
No, no. Awesome. Thank you.
You ready? Okay. I'm going to call this meeting of the Mountain View Weston School District Board of Trustees back into order at 7 p.m. And I will note that no action was taken in closed session, and I will ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, consent agenda. The following items will be handled with one action. However, any item may be removed from consideration by individual board members or the superintendent. Is there a motion?
I would like to pull
Hold on a
item.
second. I'm asking, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by trustee Lambert, seconded by trustee Gutierrez, that we approve the consent agenda. Now we'll have discussion.
I want to pull item G, particularly the A-Learn, the
All
MOU
right,
for A-Learn.
okay. Anybody else want to pull any item from the consent agenda?
I had one revision to one of the minutes, and I already talked to Kathy about it, so we don't need to pull the minutes.
No. All right, so it's been moved by trustee Lambert, seconded by trustee Gutierrez, that we approve the consent agenda. We'll do it A through F. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously, and we'll move item G for the end of action. Now we'll move on to item 6, communications employee organizations. Any member of an employee organization wishing to speak to us? Seeing none. Any district committees that people would like to report on? Seeing none, we'll move on to superintendent's report.
Good evening. I want to welcome both of our 2 new directors. The first one is the new director of child nutrition. We welcome Ms. Debbie Alston as the new director of child nutrition. Debbie comes to us from Alameda Unified School District and brings with her 40 years of experience in and as a culinary arts instructor, catering, and food service management. Ms. Alston received her bachelor's degree from the University of California, Berkeley.
Yay, go Bears.
We figured you liked that one. And her culinary degree from San Jose State. Ms. Alston has received numerous awards, such as the Burlingame Platinum Status Award and twice named Airmark Food Service Director of the Year. One of her responsibilities will be to oversee the implementation of the farm to cafeteria model by finding innovative ways to keep the school meal program supplied with fresh, seasonal, organic, and/or sustainably grown produce and products, and building partnerships between the school district and regional agriculture. Debbie's food philosophy is to feed the children local, fresh, seasonal foods and let them explore and expand their palates. So I just want to welcome Debbie Alston to our district and wanted to introduce her to you all.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.
The second one is our new Director of Maintenance, Operation, and Transportation. We welcome Mr. Jim Bakos as the new Director of MOT. Jim comes to us from Berryessa Union School District in San Jose and brings with him 12 years of experience in the school district's facilities management and operations departments. He has over 30 years experience managing facilities maintenance and construction programs for the California Department of Education and the United States Air Force. Mr. Bakos received his Bachelor's of Science in Engineering, Technology, Construction from the University of West Florida and an MBA Project Management from Golden Gate University. Jim will be responsible for planning and directing long-range facility repairs, maintenance, and transportation operations for the district. Please join me in also welcoming Jim to the MVWSD family.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
And then just the last announcement is that we are one of 8 school districts in the state of California to receive a AAA rating by Moody's. I'm sure there are a lot of countries that would love to get a AAA rating also. So that's just a good, that's a good piece of work from our team, the finance department, also the board in terms of leadership. And so I just want to commend everybody for their work to make sure that happens. And that will definitely help us when it comes time for selling our bonds.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Clark. All right, we'll move on to community comments. This is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. I've got one card. Is there anyone else wishing to speak to us at this time? Okay, Mr. Bell, you want to come up to and make sure the microphone is on? No. So can somebody show him how
Green
you?
button on
At the,
somewhere.
Test.
yeah, it's good.
There we go.
So you have 3 minutes.
Great. Okay, so I'm Steve Bell. My son goes to Landals, and I'd like to talk about student enrollment and growth. You may have seen the article in the Mountain View Voice for today that showed the wait lists at different schools, and also want to talk about the growth that we're seeing that we kind of expected to see. So 5 out of 8 schools now have kindergarten wait lists. Huff, Landals, and Bub. These schools all have 4 kindergarten classrooms, which means 96 kindergartners, assuming 24 per classroom. With that many kindergartens each year, there won't be enough classrooms to support them in the coming years with the 450 student per school guideline. So that breaks down to 96 students per grade times 6 grades. At that rate, we'd be looking at 576 students per school. So you probably know where I'm going with this. So we have the students, because of the German school lease, we have the money. We need to open Slater as soon as possible to alleviate this overcrowding problem. And the longer we keep it closed, the worse the problem will become. And in a few years, we're going to keep seeing these students carry on through the grades. So with respect, Dr. Rudolph in the article mentioned that the Stevenson only has 2 kindergarten grades this year, which is true, and that does make the problem worse. But the argument against that is that the kindergarten students are up over last year by 12 students. So last year was 642. Sorry, last year was 631, and this year it's 642. And so once again, I'd like to remind and encourage us to consider reopening Slater as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to.
I had a question of the superintendent about demographics. I was under the impression for our last several demographics that we have a loss rate of about 3% per year for our elementary schools, all the way from kindergarten through 5th grade. Do you remember reading that number? So our 6th grade enrollments are never as high as our kindergarten enrollments.
We do lose kids as they are matriculating into middle schools, yes.
I even meant before they make the trend. There's historically been a 9% drop for going into middle school, the 5th to 6th grade transition. But I meant K to 1 is 3%, 1 to 2. Do you remember reading that? Or
I do not.
oh,
Sorry.
I would check that, because I think when you just multiply the kindergarten numbers, it doesn't match what historically has happened in this district. For those multiplications that were just done.
Okay, I'm going to move on to item 7, review and action. Item A, Board Policy and Administrative Regulation Number 6174, Education of English Language Learners. First reading.
Good evening. This is just a kind of a follow-up from our meeting. As you know, in November, we brought you this for first reading of changing our criteria to match our new assessment. And so now we're bringing, and then we had follow-up meetings to kind of discuss the criteria. And at our last meeting, we presented you with our research and studies and came up with a recommendation for the board. And so now we're bringing this up again to use the criteria that we set forth at our last meeting and revise our board policy and administrative regulations for the reclassification process in our district.
Thank you. Any questions or comments by the board?
Yes.
Trustee Lambert?
So what is the purpose of these minor changes?
It's just that every time something changes in the way you're going to get reclassified, the board is supposed to approve any changes. And so when we brought this in November, we had a new way of assessing our students. So that changed the criteria, and the board is always supposed to review those before we continue to use any new criteria or assessment process.
Yeah, I apologize. Maybe to state it differently. What's the objective of the changes? You know,
So that we're clear with everybody, showing what kind of assessments we're going to be using to meet the reclassification criteria. That's the purpose.
Thank you.
And the way we set them up now, it makes them more flexible. So if there is some changes, we're more generic so that we have a little more flexibility, so we won't have to go through this process every time.
Trustee Nelson?
So this is essentially meeting the input you got from us in November. We had this large discussion, just one regular meeting ago, right? Which was reported fairly extensively by that guy sitting in the back. And this is to make our policy match what that is and also make it a little bit more generic so we can do similar kinds of things in the future and still stay within the policy that the board is setting.
And also within the guidelines from the state and federal government.
Right, okay, right.
Without any more questions or comments by the board, move on to community comments. Would any member of the community like to address the board on this issue? Yeah, you can fill it out later. You can make your comment now.
Hello.
Hello.
I wanted to thank the administration and the board for looking at this issue in depth after parent raised concerns about the plan for updating the criteria. And I'm very encouraged to see how much of an effort was made to look at what was being done by the district, assessing its fairness to students, and moving forward with a plan that seems to be fairer to students and to be reasonably updatable in the future as guidance comes maybe from the state regarding criteria for reclassification using the new common core testing.
Thank you. And for those people following at home, will you state your name for the record?
My name is Agnès Charles-Bertillier. I'm
Thank
a
you.
parent in the district of 2 students who are formerly English language learners who have been reclassified both in 3rd grade.
Okay, thank you. And now please fill out a card and give it to Ms. Loga. I am looking for a motion.
Sure. I'd like to make a motion that the board approve board policy number 6174, education for English language learners, and review, actually,
We have reviewed.
we reviewed it, to approve the recommended motion as presented to the board at first reading.
A second.
Okay, and
wanted to
I
have a-
think this is a record where it's moved by Gutierrez and seconded by Lambert. But we could check the minutes on that. It's been moved by trustee Gutierrez and seconded by trustee Lambert that the board approve board policy number 6174, education for English learners, and note that we have reviewed administrative regulation number 6174, education for English language learners at first reading as presented. Any further discussion on this? Trustee Nelson?
Yeah, I want to, at least my comment of the way this happened is, this isn't something really the board did. It's entirely the administration listened to what our comments were, brought in what the community was saying, went back and thought about it some more and did benchmarking versus other places, and came back with this idea that I'm entirely satisfied myself also. So the board, it really had nothing to do with exactly how it came out, but the direction was given by the board and the community helped, but the accolades go entirely to the administration, in my opinion.
If I may make a quick comment, I think that it's a little bit more than that, in my opinion. I like that we had community feedback from our schools, that the parents showed up and participated, that they explained to the board and to the administration as well the rationale behind their frustration, and that we took the time as a board to act like a board and listen to those concerns, address those issues to the administration in general, and say, we need something better. Now is the time to act. After a further discussion and analysis, something was presented to us that was more equitable. And I think that's a win-win for everyone in general, but more so because the parents also came out in force and said why. So I'd like to acknowledge that as well. Thank you so much.
Okay. All in favor of this motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right. Thank you, Ms. Rogers and Dr. Rudolph. Okay, we'll move on to item B, 2016-2017 school year calendar revised.
Well, I didn't expect to be here, but I am. We need to make a change to the calendar. I take full responsibility for counting wrong. And I'm not sure when or where it happened. So I've decided to let that go and just ask you to approve our way of dealing with it on a day that everyone decides, why do we have school on the Friday before this break? We all just kind of decide that would work for this year to solve this problem of this one extra student day. Because we have 2 days at the end of school. You can't just have a Monday to end school. Moving it from the second day has a ripple effect on other days that are planned already. At the beginning of school, this one just kind of was the spot that everybody could say, okay, we can do this for 1 year. So I'm asking you to approve our revised calendar.
Any questions or comments by the board?
So this does not match the high school district.
No.
So that is not a must-have.
It is, but we don't know what they're going to do with their issue that they actually still have
Too many days.
with an interesting day. So we're just going on with this.
Show must go on.
We want to have a calendar that people can look at and actually depend on our website. So.
Any other questions or comments by the board? Any members of the public wishing to address the board on this topic? Okay, I'll bring it back for a vote and perhaps additional discussion. Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that the board approve the revised 2016-2017 school year calendar as presented.
I second.
So we're on a roll here. It's been moved by trustee Gutierrez and seconded by trustee Lambert that the board will approve the revised 2016-17 school year calendar as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you for your understanding.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to
Back to
you're right. Thank you for the reminder. Going back to item G under consent agenda, contracts for ratification or review.
Yeah, the only thing I wanted to look at or review was the MOU from A-Learn, which is a summer program. that we were talking about last meeting. This is, here's a couple of pages from that presentation. It has some of my remarks on it. And I don't know if you can pull it up. Page 6 is the one I'm talking about in that amendment, or excuse me, in the packet. It's page 6. Since everybody can pull that up. Unless you can't pull it up, I want a piece of paper. There's a piece of paper here, but if you can pull up page 6, that's what I would like to review with the administration. One of the things that we've been working on is accountability and data usage. And page 6 has a spreadsheet. What I wanted to know and have us review is this spreadsheet aligned with the district standard for how we're going to be evaluating summer programs for their success? Or is it just one-off for just this one program? The other thing is, if it is a standard, will we have this spreadsheet filled out for the other programs like the Valdez math one? Particularly, I'm just thinking of math to math. And if not, what's the administration's, meaning Dr. Rudolph's plan for comparing outcomes to other math programs? And I didn't see anything in this MOU about when we make a decision if this program should be discontinued for low academic success. I can't remember what the terminology was used for when we're going to have strategic
Purposeful abandonment.
purposeful abandonment
Right.
of particular programs. Because I didn't see any, I'm sure the vendor itself wouldn't come up, well, you should get rid of us if we don't meet this standard. But I'm wondering where we're going to start having that kind of accountability. So that's essentially the big general question. When we identify and spend money on programs, how do we decide which ones are most successful and compare them, in this case, against other summer math programs that we're spending time and effort on?
So Dr. Rudolph or Ms. Bauer, do you want to respond to that?
So this, the spreadsheet, the sample spreadsheet in here is similar to what we use as a district. It's similar to the district standard. We actually do pull this data at the end of the summer program. We also include the pre and post test that was given in the summer program, so we can look at that, because we're, in some of these programs, they're targeting specific skills, and the idea is about a specific skill set and about avoiding summer learning loss, as opposed to correcting huge academic gaps, if that makes sense. So to your question, yes, the spreadsheet looks very similar to the one we use, although we add some more data to ours. This is required by them as part of our MOU because it's their program.
I know. I guess I was asking our program, because I understand this is their program. I
Right.
want to know what we have that's uniform.
We use a spreadsheet very similar to this,
Right,
only
so
we
you
add a
take this
little more.
data and you put it into your spreadsheet?
Mhm.
Okay.
We control all of this data.
I understand.
So we add
that.
it to our spreadsheet and we add actually more things to
Okay.
it.
So that spreadsheet is a public document, right? I think the superintendent knows the direction I'm drifting off towards.
Sure.
Okay.
Anything we've created.
Any other comments on this item? Can I have a motion?
I move that the board approve item G of the consent agenda.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved by trustee Lambert, seconded by trustee Gutierrez, that the board approve item G of the consent agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. All right, thank you, Ms. Bauer. So now we'll move on to item 9, review and discussion strategic educator effectiveness expenditure plan.
Good evening. As part of the 15-16 budget adoption from the state, there was money given out to school districts for educator effectiveness funding. And what we have to do as a school district is come to the board, present the plan, and then at a subsequent board meeting in public, we have to then take action. The board will be asked to take action. It's really simple. The school district was given approximately $400,000 to spend over the next 2 years, and it can only be used for essentially beginning teacher support and administrators. So professional development for teachers, professional development for administrators, new teachers induction program, and the like. And so what we're presenting as part of the plan is essentially over the next 2 years, we will use that $400,000 to pay for beginning teacher support and administrator professional development. It's pretty much, it's very
Thank you.
straightforward, very simple.
So any questions or comments by the board? Trustee Nelson?
Yeah, I do have a question about, this is not permanent money, right?
No, it's one-time money.
Okay. It seems like we're hiring positions that are permanent positions that we'll have to continue them on, which I know was one of the worries about how we were spending some other money somewhere, is that we didn't want to hire people that were permanent position people for when we only had temporary money. How are you going to prevent these people from the idea that is one of them's a teacher?
No, we're not hiring any staff. We're providing beginning teacher support and administration.
I know, but when I read the
professional
detail, it
development.
said they were hiring. Do you have that up?
Right.
There is no detail for this item. What are you referring to?
If you're looking at the expenditure plan that was
Yeah.
attached,
Yeah.
right, that's the expenditure plan that comes from the state. This is the document that we have to complete in July of 18
Okay.
to send into the state to get money.
Okay.
These
So you're
are
not going to hire anybody permanent on this?
Correct. There are bits of mentors, but that we will use for new teachers. But we already have bits of mentors in the district.
Okay.
This is essentially $400,000 that's going to augment the current program that we have for new teacher support, induction, and administrator professional development.
Okay. But as long as it's clear that we're not hiring, because somewhere or another, it was like we're hiring 2 new people to handle something. And maybe it was in another part of the packet, but
So we already employ 2 bits of support providers as part of our program.
okay. So we're
this
not going to
money,
hire
We're
2
not
more.
hiring anybody additional.
Great. That's all I wanted to make sure of. Okay.
Any other questions or comments by the board? Trustee Coladonado?
So is this going to come back again and we approve it at
Yes.
the next meeting or something?
Correct.
And by the way, Trustee Nelson, that's sort of your question that you had. That's the sort of thing you could have handled ahead of time and not taken up meeting time for that, I think.
Right. If I'd had forever to read these packets, but I don't.
Okay, all right.
Like the last issue, by the way, I sent in the questions that I was going to, this thing about the
I retract
e-learn.
my comment if you'll retract your tangent.
Okay, any other comments by members of the board? Thank you very much for your item, and we look forward to it next time. Okay, move
I know.
on to, yeah,
That's why I said there.
item 9B, 2016,
Kathy, are you
2017,
pulling it up?
Local Control Accountability Plan
I know.
and Budget Adoption Timeline.
So Assistant Superintendent Bauer and I are back at the microphone to present a draft timeline for the adoption of the LCAP and budget for the 2016-17 school year. One of the perks that came out of the local control funding formula was the creation of the LCAP, which forces the business department and the ed services side to work together. There were many times in many districts where ed services sat on one side of the building, business services sat on the other, and never the two met. So we meet pretty regularly and discuss the process for LCAP, especially because the budget plays a huge part in the adoption that goes with that. So what we have for tonight is a draft timeline that has been created by us together, looking at the requirements for LCAP and budget adoption, plus also the opportunity for us to come forward, back and forth to the board and the public to present where we are in the timeline in the adoption process itself over the spring. So tonight on March 17th, we're presenting the draft timeline and taking input from the board on the, and essentially we can make any changes to it, and then we'll just make those changes, come forward on future board meetings. On April 7th, my side, business will be bringing forward the 2016-17 budgeted assumptions, just a draft. It will just be a draft at that night. We'll take input from the board, the community, and then on April 21st, we'll bring those budget assumptions back for action. Also at that same meeting night, we'll have the LCAP survey results, tentative pending completion. That's a nice place for us to bring it on April 21st. But if we don't make if it's not completed by April 21st, we'll bring that on May 5th. May 5th, there are your LCAP survey results that will, if they're not done on April 21st. And then also there'll be an LCAP update to the board, initial revisions and budget components, if those are ready at that point. If those aren't finished on May 5th, those will come on May 19th. Also on May 19th, the governor releases his May revise, the middle of May. We're a group of us, the superintendent, both assistant superintendents, myself, and the director of fiscal services, and also the director of special ed. We're attending the school services presentation of the governor's budget, which happens to be on Wednesday, Wednesday, the 18th of May. So we will turn that around pretty quickly and bring a presentation to the board on the 19th of what that looks like for 16-17. We'll also update budget assumptions at that time based on the presentations that we received the day before. And then the LCAP will give an update. If it's not done on May 5th, that's where it'll be finished on the 19th. And then really June is about the public hearings for the LCAP itself, the EPA Education Protection Account money that we get, Prop 30, and then also the budget itself. Those are public hearings. And then at the next meeting on June 16th will be the adoption of those three documents in that order. That's kind of it.
Thank you. Questions or comments by the board? Trustee Caldonado.
Thank you for laying this out so clearly. Where would you imagine we could most effectively dovetail strategic plan findings or goals into this process?
We'll be talking about the strategic plan goals tonight, the big buckets. And then as we go through these meetings, every board meeting, you'll have a strategic plan update. And as we get towards the end of the strategic plan, where we're getting close to the finish of having one actually out there, we're targeting probably around May 19th to have the draft in for it, and then with the goal of the 2nd or the 16th having it finalized and approved. But part of this is just going to depend on how fast we write this. So, you know, we're working on it. We have goals this week, have a strategy session with the public on April 6th, 7th. We go through it with the leadership team, and then we have a couple more follow-up meetings to sort of fine tune it. So this will be pretty much in step with the strategic plan.
So then follow-up question. You said May 19th was the day we're targeting to have a draft of the strategic plan. On that meeting, busy meeting, should we expect to see the strategic plan earlier in the agenda than the LCAP and so forth, so that we can first make sure we understand what our strategic plan is as we look at the other items through the lens of the strategic plan? Is that a reasonable way to think about doing?
The LCAP will mirror the strategic plan pretty much in the same way. Mrs. Bauer and I have already talked about how she's going to rewrite and sort of make adjustments to it, provided that we can. I mean, there will be some things that may be extremely specific to our district as opposed to what the state is requiring. But we're going to do our best to make sure that both of those are sort of lockstep across the board in terms of the goals and what our metrics are. And so that's one of the big things that's going to come up is how does the state has already identified what its metrics are, and how do we tie those metrics into the strategic plan so that we're not doing multiple things at the same time. So we're working on that, but yes, we can easily have the strategic plan come first and then follow it up with, you know, you've seen this and now let's translate it to LCAP.
Right, because LCAP's like 1 year's implementation of, in theory, it should be like 1 year's implementation of the 5-year strategic plan or whatever, right?
Yes, the LCAP plan will be a 3-year plan,
3-year plan.
but we update it every single year.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the strategic plan, even though it's a 5-year plan, we'll review its progress and
roll it forward.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Superintendent Riddle.
Other comments by members of the board?
I had one question, because surveys are always unclear how they come out. Michigan political surveys of who is going to get,
Well, who was going to cross over and vote for somebody else? That was a
right,
component.
Feel as
yeah,
a bird?
yeah,
Nelson?
it can, no, they can sometimes not necessarily show what in actuality. I wonder, is there any problem if some of these deadlines aren't made, or the tentative pending completion sounds like it probably isn't going to be made? If those survey results can be released to us by email before, as soon as they're done, rather than wait possibly, 2 weeks, a week and a half. I would like to see the survey results as soon as they're finished, if they don't meet this May 5th result.
I mean,
Or actually, the April 21st result, April 21st time period. If they're done on, May 1st, or if they're done on April 24th, I would really like to see the survey results.
the same company that did our salary study is the same company that's doing this one.
Right.
And so just like with the housing, the salary, sorry, I got housing on mine. It's the same with the salary comparison. As soon as I got it, I released it to
Okay,
you
great.
right afterwards. So as soon as we get the results from the company,
Thank
which
you.
is our research arm, we'll send it out.
Any other comments or questions by the board? Any members of the public wishing to address the board on this item? Okay, we're going to move on to the next item, which is item 9C, exploring teacher housing.
All right, I'm up. So we're going to talk about teacher housing. This was a request from the board. And so, I think this is a very complex issue. So I'm going to talk about sort of what the landscape is, sort of go over some of the larger pictures that we have here. And then really, I'm going to ask just a couple questions about what comes next. And then I'll talk about some specific steps that we can do, knowing that this is really if this is a road that we go down, this is actually a couple years conversation in order to actually achieve this goal. So the first thing that we want to look at is sort of what the landscape is, right? So our biggest concern is that, and this was reported in the San Jose News earlier this year, is that really to live in Silicon Valley, most of our teachers are being priced out. And the Joint Center for the Housing Study from Harvard noted that half of the residents actually in the Bay Area were paying more than 30% of their income towards rent. And in the Santa Clara, San Jose area, 47.2% of all renters in our area are burdened. You compare that to 48% in San Francisco. And one of the biggest things that actually just came out last week is that San Francisco has finally eclipsed Manhattan as one of the most expensive places to live. So this obviously is a big issue in terms of when we think about our teacher housing and its impact. And so what we're going to do. What's also interesting is that in the San Francisco Bay Area, the median renter's cost is $1,780 and the average earning capacity within this area is about $70,000. Now you contrast this to the average teacher salary, which is $63,000, and then you look at the average rent in Mountain View, which is $2,600 to $2,900. So it's obviously, even though we're looking at the Bay Area as a larger group, there's a big difference or gulf between what people pay in Mountain View versus what the average is in the actual Bay Area. So it's really an issue for our teachers, especially our youngest teachers who are doing this. And what we also know is that there are reports out there of individuals who are renting out rooms, sort of like dorms, in downtown Mountain View for about $1,000 a pop. And so it's really a big issue in terms of, you know, are teachers able to afford to live in our area, considering the cost. The second piece of this is, sorry, it's delayed. Here we go. The second part is about the commute. Now, what's deceptive about this, and I think we all know this, unless you live in Mountain View, that the average commute time in the San Francisco Bay Area is actually 24 minutes. The average nationally is actually 23. But what's interesting is that any of us that have been on the 101 know that the average commute time is definitely not 24 minutes, but that's what's being reported. But in the East Bay, which is actually the cheaper part of the Bay Area, and cheap is relative, right? So I need to reference that real quick. The average commute time is 40 minutes. And again, we're not talking about when it's bumper to bumper traffic. We're simply talking about average across the whole day. So obviously, one of our biggest concerns here is also that teachers are moving further away from the district and they're commuting in, and all things being perfect, their average time to get here would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 40 minutes. And, you know, I know that we could talk to Dr. Clark, who also travels from the northern East Bay, and he would tell you it's probably a little bit longer to get here than just 40 minutes, right? So then, you know, as we continue to look at the landscape, and this one came from the Atlantic, is that, you know, in terms of purchasing a house, the affordability of purchasing a house is actually very slim. And so, as I mentioned earlier, the average rent is $2,600 to $2,900, and the average teacher salary in the state of California is $63,000. Now, here's where this number actually plays a big role. If we look at this point, it's not going to work, so I'll walk over there. So if we look at this area right over here, what we notice is that Mountain View is right up here in the green. And that means that the average housing price is actually $1.75 to $2.5 million. And in San Jose, you see that the price actually drops just a little bit. But if we look at Santa Clara County as a whole, and we look at the $63,000 average teaching price, then what that really means is that only 1.8% of the housing stock in Santa Clara County is actually affordable for an individual making $63,000. So I say this to say 1.8, it may be 1.3, I'm sorry. When 1.8% of the housing stock is available in general, the objective of trying to get people to purchase houses may be a little bit far-reached also. And what we notice, and I'll talk about this when I get to the notion of what other places are doing, what Santa Clara has noticed, and they have a two-part housing program. One of the parts is to help teachers purchase houses. What Santa Clara has been noticing is that it's sort of like a balloon payment. So after the first 5 years are up, it balloons back up to its regular payment, and that teachers are actually defaulting on the property. And so that's a big concern for the housing market. But this is actually interesting. So this comes from the New York Times, and this is actually 2005. And what they reported in the New York Times in 2005 is that there was a housing crisis in the Bay Area, and that Santa Clara County was actually trying to address this issue. And, you know, I guess I don't think that our housing stock hasn't increased that much, but what we do know is that the price of houses hasn't dropped since 2005. In fact, it's went even further. And, you know, what's even complicating this a little bit more is that according to the San Jose Mercury News, 60% of Mountain View residents are actually renters. So we have a high renting population. So, sorry, I was off by 63. It's actually 69 is the average salary, and it's 1.3% of the houses. So let's look at what some local solutions have been. So we have different places, a couple community colleges, as well as a couple school districts who have attempted to solve this problem. Some, and it depends on who they are. And then there's actually Los Angeles has done this. There are some rural counties throughout the nation who have done this. So in this case, what you can see is that probably the one that attracts people the most is the Santa Clara County Casa de Maestro, which is, they have about 70 units and they have 2 different developments. And the average cost is about $880 to $1,400 a month. But what they've also noticed is, and this was actually in the first article that I had referenced up there, is that the teachers can actually live there for up to 7 years. And one of the teachers that was featured in that article said, well, my 7 years is up and I'm not really sure what I'm going to do. And the one thing she commented on was, she said, you know, I was able to take vacations, I was able to pay off bills, I was able to do this, this, and this, but I wasn't able to actually save for a house. Cupertino has an RFP in place, and they are planning on using a local closed school site in order to purchase or to build teacher housing. And what we know about Cupertino is that they're experiencing declining enrollment. So they don't want to sell the land, but they have a surplus property out there. And San Mateo is actually looking at the exact same thing. They're going to be moving a high school and building a new one. And in the process of moving the high school, they want to try and turn that existing high school into teacher housing. And so that's also one thing. Now, San Francisco has an interesting program. So they utilize a state program as well as a Teacher Next Door program. And so what they do is they provide loans up to $20,000 in order to use for a down payment. But what we also know about San Francisco is that the average house in San Francisco is somewhere around $1 million, the housing price. And so, you know, if you're thinking about a $20,000 payment or a 20% down payment, $20,000 doesn't even get you close or even near the door of what's needed to get in. So, and the other part that San Francisco Unified also does is that they use the HUD program in order to purchase houses. But the problem with the HUD program is that there's actually no housing stock in San Francisco that qualifies as a HUD property because all of the foreclosures are being purchased at a very high rate and then flipped and either turned into condos or they are turned into just regular houses that are sold for a very high price. And then Oakland Unified is also discovering or is in negotiations to figure out a solution to this. Now, the one that's actually not up here is Los Angeles Unified. And I think this is a cautionary tale for all of us. So Los Angeles Unified opened teacher housing this summer. And it came as a big success. But they partnered with an organization who actually tailored the apartments for Section 8 housing. And so the teachers don't qualify for Section 8 housing. And so what ended up happening is Los Angeles Unified now just has a rental property next to a school as opposed to teacher housing. And so one of the things I would just say is that we need to be careful if we go down this road to think about making sure that we do it right and that we don't make that similar mistake that Los Angeles Unified made. So let's look also what the city of Mountain View does. So the city of Mountain View does actually offer below market housing, and they also offer below market rate rental properties. Unfortunately, though, the stock is very low and there is a wait list to get into those properties. And then there is also, in the past, there was a program called the HOOT program, which came from OPES advisors, where they would take the realtor fees and they would apply that actually to the down payment. And this program actually hasn't been in place for a couple of years, but it was a local solution by realtors and advisors to try and help teachers purchase housing. So what comes next, right? This is obviously something that all of us are concerned about. So I guess the questions that I have is, this is something that we want to do. And does this align with our goals? And so you'll hear me talk about this a lot, about the alignment part of it. The other question that I have is, how do we fund this? We cannot tax the public in order to build housing, which means that we have to use money from our operating budget, whether it's through a certificate of participation. We would have to pay for it, which is what other places do. And then we want it to be cost neutral. Last thing we want to do is to build housing and then to turn around and charge rent to a point where we actually are making money. And that's not what other districts do. And so we want it to be cost neutral. What land do we use? So this is an interesting part for us, because our property, we have a lot of land in our district that is available for us to use, but some of the most ideal spots that we have are actually not in places that are high density. And so the residents that live there most likely would probably put up a fight against putting high density property there. But on the flip side, the city actually would benefit from us providing affordable housing. It could count that towards their quota. So there are pluses and there are minuses to doing this. The other thing that we've seen over the past is that developers are required to set aside X amount of units, or they have to pay a fee. And what most developers are paying now is just the fee, and simply saying the city can deal with this at a later time. So we would have to figure out what land we use. We would need to partner with a couple of organizations. The board would not be able to oversee this. So what Santa Clara did was they created another board. That board is actually the one who manages it. And that allows for, if an employee is actually there and something occurs, that the employee doesn't view it as a retaliatory action against them. But we would need to partner with the city and possibly some other organizations in order to get this done. And then I think probably what I would suggest is our next first step, if this is the road that we want to go down, is that we would need to get a better understanding of demand. So we sent out a survey earlier to sort of gauge what was out there. And the survey, it gave us a lot of good information, but it didn't give us the type of information that we wanted. We didn't get a good understanding of the average commute, or how far our teachers and staff are commuting to get to work. We didn't get a good sense of the average rent that they're paying. And so we need to redraft the survey and send it out so that it gives us a little bit more details, as opposed to would you want to rent in Mountain View. So that was just a survey draft. We can do that one again. Okay. That's it.
Thank you very much. I think, so thank you for the presentation, all the information. I think you want to hear from each of us about what our thoughts are. So what I'd like to do is go down the line. I'll start with Trustee Gutierrez. Give everybody up to 2 minutes, and everybody can share their thoughts about this. And before I start that, can I ask if there's going to be any members of the public wishing to comment? Okay, so Trustee Gutierrez, if you can provide some.
Thank you, Madam President.
input.
Thank you, Superintendent Rudolph. You know, this is a very interesting time that we're in right now. Just like we're trying to take care of several issues in-house because of past records, City Council is trying to do the same, but there's no consensus as to how to actually resolve anything. There is awareness of the issues and what that means, not just to teachers, but for everyone who lives in Mountain View. My commute's 45 minutes to get to a place that's 13 miles away on 101.
Right.
On the way back, it's about an hour and 15, an hour and 20, if there's no accidents, right? But the bigger issue, though, is affordability.
Right.
And I think that even though the City Council looked at it from a certain perspective, that's impacting us at a much larger scale because it goes to our demographic groups that we serve, that we're here to help, our students and their families. And we've seen what the reaction's been so far to that with what was suggested last Tuesday. Not much. And that's a difficult situation to be in. So when you look at the options that are there now that exist in surrounding counties and cities, it's something that you look at and you ponder. But the reality is right now, we don't know if we should do something like that because of various circumstances. We don't know what the teachers think about whether or not they want to be here long-term or not. We don't know what they're paying, but we have an idea. But the other issue, though, I think is how realistic is this? What would we be able to provide? Who would be willing to partner with us? Perhaps Los Altos. And what will this look like? Because I think we all understand that the needs are there and it's expensive to be here. And that's going to affect our student population one way or another because they'll be affected by it with the increases going up and up and up. So it's a big question mark. And I'm looking forward to what you get with the survey. But this, I think, is still is in its infancy stage.
Thank you. Trustee Lambert.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One has to do with impact and one about how to finance this. Maybe you can't answer this, but I'm curious to know, looking at these, what other school districts have done. Have they been able to provide housing, these examples, at a level that makes an impact on the need of the teachers? Maybe providing, a small percentage. They've, it's been a huge effort and they haven't really, made a dent in the problem, just like low income housing does in Mountain View. We can do something, but we can't make a dent in the issue. So I wonder really how successful or how meaningful these have been. And I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on the funding. You mentioned that we can't tax the public. And, as I'm thinking through all of this, I'm going, well, we have a bond out right now. We have, Slater will probably need a bond for, and there's bonding capacities and things like this. And, if we could, have a bond for teacher housing, well, that's something else. And maybe we can't do it right now. Could you sort of talk about that?
Yeah. So let me talk about the impact. I think part of this is,
I do have a comment on that based on the data that you gave. So I wondered if you'd like to wait.
I'd like to see if the superintendent could answer his question before being interrupted.
Yeah, well,
So
part of his time. Sorry.
Superintendent Rudolph.
Yeah. So I think part of this is about the scale, right? So if we were to offer 70 houses, would that make a significant impact? That's close to a third of our teachers. So that probably would make a big difference, assuming, I'm making an assumption here. So I got to preface that because I could be wrong. But what I'm assuming is that the teachers who have been in our district for quite some time were able to purchase a house when it was a little bit more affordable, which is sort of a joke, right? Or they may have already purchased a home before the market has shot back up. Now, that's a big assumption. But if we were to build 100 houses, that's close to 100 units. I'm running out of time every time. So I think it would. Santa Clara and Cupertino are a lot larger. So I would say probably 70 units in Santa Clara County is not as great of an impact as, yes, USD, sorry. It's not as big of an impact, or Cupertino's is not as big of an impact just because of the size, but it doesn't mean that it doesn't make an impact with the staff. I think in both of those cases, and I think Cupertino's going to go down this road too, is that they actually limit it for new teachers. The teachers who are your most fragile ones because of their earning capacity in the beginning and not the higher end, which is why there's also a 7-year gap. So the idea is that after 7 years in Santa Clara Unified, that you have you're closer to what the mean salary is, and you can afford a more expensive place, or you have had the opportunity to save, as opposed to when you first start out. And I don't know what Santa Clara Unified starting salary is, but when you first start out at 50,000 or 40,000 or something. So I think it does have some type of impact. And at least in the stories that I read in the newspaper reports, the teachers were pretty appreciative of it. So I think it does have some type of sustainable impact. There were references to some teachers who were saying, I want to have a family and I can't afford to move. So, there's some nuances to that. So in terms of impact, I think it would, but I think part of this is about if we only built 7 units, like the school is right on Shoreline, that's not going to really make that big of a dent. But if we built 70 units, if we built 50 units, it is possible that it would have a bigger draw. And that would be one of the things that we would need to figure out. Who are we going to offer this housing to? Are we going to offer it to younger teachers? Are we going to offer it, open it up to all teachers? How long would we want them to stay there for? So those would be questions that we would have to answer after we get there. In terms of the funding question, we would need to use a certificate of participation in order to build it. Now, in 2005, when they built Casa de Maestro, the cost of it was about $6 million. I wish it was 6,000, right? It's about $6 million to build the first set, which I think was about 50 units or so. So it was pretty affordable. And one of the benefits that we would have is that we have the land that we could build on, which is the most expensive part, which is why Cupertino, San Mateo are looking to do it. Oakland's actually trying to get the city to purchase land for them. So that's a little bit of an interesting dynamic, but we have the land in order to pull it off. The cost would be how much does it cost to build the units in order to make that work. So, but we wouldn't be able to go out for a bond for teachers. We would have to figure out a different way to finance the project. Is that?
Yeah. That's
Okay.
Okay, so going third, a lot of the issues have been raised, and I appreciate,
You're out of time now.
I am already.
You always talk so long.
I appreciate my fellow trustees raising these issues and raising these questions, because I think these are things we're going to need to look into. I'll say I am definitely interested in continuing this conversation. I'm interested in seeing if we can figure out a way to provide rental housing for teachers in some manner. I don't know. I'm interested in the, we always talk about attract and retain teachers. I think this would be a draw for attracting new teachers. So I'm interested in that. I don't know what more I can add to the conversation at this point.
I would just say for Santa Clara Unified, the reason why they actually got their teacher housing was because the superintendent at that time, they were talking about it for over a year. And the superintendent said, it's time to stop talking. It's time to start doing something. And one of the things in Trustee Sangeef, I forget his last name. Yeah, he mentioned in his notes, because him and I met to discuss this issue, that ultimately, in order to get this done, there has to be a champion that's willing to see it all the way through, because this is a big time commitment in order to pull this one off. And so in 2005, when they completed in 2009, but in 2005, it was the superintendent who pushed or sort of willed this project through. And so maybe that may be why it's one of the few. I'm not sure about how the community colleges got theirs and who was the champion of it, but his notes to me when we met, because he presented about this to the board earlier, was someone has to champion this, and then eventually you bring on someone to manage it.
Thank you. Trustee Coladonado.
Thank you. Thank you for putting this report together. It's very informative to me, and I think the rest of the board. I'd like to know if you think it'd be not too hard to set up a tour of the Santa Clara facilities. I'd certainly be interested in them. From reading the Atlantic article, the teacher who's quoted says something about, oh, it's great. You can have your privacy, but if you want to go to the common room, so it's not a normal building. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of am curious to see what that's like. And if I thought, in my own opinion, I thought that teachers in Mountain View would be interested in that.
Okay.
A certificate of participation. We could use the rent that is paid to fund a certificate of participation, right?
We could, yes.
It doesn't need to come out of our other budget. It could come strictly from, you know,
Yeah, currently you have 800,000 that is being slated for Slater.
Mm.
And then we have the rental income from,
I meant the rent from the units that we build.
oh, yes. So what we would need to do is you would get the certificate of participation first.
Uh-huh.
Sorry about that. And you would build. And then in order to pay it, you would have to figure out the price point in order to become cost neutral.
Right.
And then that's what Santa Clara did. So they figured out what's the cost, how many units do they need in order to pay it off.
Okay.
And once they got there, that actually continued to pay off the price. So
That
yes,
seems- It seems like a decent structure.
yeah, we would have to figure out what the breaking point is.
Okay.
Yeah. And not go over it.
And so then the developer that's mentioned in the Atlantic article did these like for no profit margin.
Mhm.
What do you think would be the cost for us to reach out to them again and say, are you still in this business? And if so, could you whip up a pro forma financials for us? What would
Yeah.
it look like?
They actually are I don't want to say preferred because we have to go to our RFP in order to pull it off, but they tend to be if you look across the landscape, they've done a couple of these, and they are the one who seem to come in at the lowest bid rate across the board. And this is one of the things that they specialize in, but we would do an RFP just like Cupertino is doing to see who would be able to assist with it. But yes, I know for a fact that the company that built Santa Clara's is still in the market of doing it.
Yeah, I had 3 points here. One, the BMR thing that the city is in, they absolutely know about staying out of Section 8. They have 120 new rental units on that Evelyn thing, which I went down and saw how big it was, right on the exact edge of the city in our district. But they put up 22.5 million out of the BMR that they have in city funds, and they put in by a vote of 6-1, another $500,000 to make sure it didn't come under Section 8 in HUD restrictions. It comes under our restrictions, which has monetary issues on it. So some of our beginning teachers will be able to afford that. The other thing I've been talking to is Councilman Siegel, and he was saying he alone knows 5 different ways that you can put together these kinds of deals. He's looked at that kind of things for community stuff. So this certificate of participation is 1 out of 5 ways that is possible to finance these things. Definitely having the land and having the land lease makes a big difference. Of the 6 units in the city that are apparently for sale, 2 of them are owned by our teachers. One of them was a teacher of Greg's children. One of them is a teacher over at Bub. And I know the teacher of Bub has said he absolutely couldn't have stayed in this district for more than a dozen years now unless he'd had that condo. So the issue of rental stuff and ownership stuff makes sense. There's a great article in August 5th, LA Times for 2008, talking about the housing in Santa Clara, and it references what happened in San Mateo. They got the chancellor of that community college district got the inspiration from the Santa Clara example and used the extra land that they had to build units. Yeah, it's surprisingly compact. For a 2.5 acre parking lot, they converted it into 22 units. So the finances are possible to do, but I absolutely agree with you. There has to be someone with a champion. It can't be you because we have a strategic plan that we need to do. So I don't know if it's a council member or who it would be, but I don't think we have the bandwidth. And I really appreciate your work on this also.
One thing, I'm sorry, I wrote this down and I forgot I can reach out to the superintendent to see about the possibility of a tour of Casa de Maestro to see if that's a possibility. I don't know what their process is. And then I want to clarify, you are correct. There are other ways to finance it. We would have to put the money up front to build it.
Well, Lenny didn't think so. Lenny knew we can't come,
Okay,
come up with
that-
the money. So there are all sorts of weird kinds of
Yeah.
lease back. I've done other ways.
Okay.
So he never wrote down the 5 for me so I could go over them.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank you,
so
Superintendent.
thank you, Superintendent Rudolph. Do you feel like you've received adequate feedback from us tonight?
So, I just want to make sure, probably the next step, if this is, and I guess that's what I'm looking for, just if this is the direction we want to go, is to actually, the next step would be to send out a survey.
Yeah.
To see what to do an additional survey to get a little bit more concrete data, find out what the average rent is that people are paying, figure out what the average commute time is, and figure out if there is a strong desire and how many people want to live in Mountain View. So we redo the survey to get a little bit more specific in terms of its data, because I don't think we went granular enough in order to get it. So if that's the direction, we'll start working on it.
Yes.
I want to
Make it so.
make a suggestion that you talk with the Santa Clara people who are on the board of the group that runs those apartments. There's also an interesting thing. Chris Chang isn't here to talk about it, but the Daily Post, of course, always talks about things about the issue of 200 square foot apartments.
Yeah,
Some-
tiny houses.
For
Yeah.
small ones for some portion of it.
Yeah.
Because if you're single, a studio in the right place is better than maybe a 2-hour
A house in
commute.
Gilroy.
But yeah, a house in Gilroy that you're sharing anyway.
We actually have the survey from Canada.
La
Kenyatta.
Cañada, yeah.
Kenyatta, sorry. And we have their survey, and so we could copy it and use that one. It's a pretty good survey, which is what I would recommend. We sort of shot in the dark, and I think we hit we hit the target, but we didn't hit it center, and so I think it's just about recalibrating and aiming a little bit better.
Did you get a number of reasonable response? I mean, a number of people that respond? Okay, that's
Yeah. And then I guess the only other question I would have is this just for teachers or is this for all employees? Because that changes the complexity of the survey that we're looking for, the response.
The city's
Trustee Nelson
BMR.
has an opinion.
The city's BMR units, it has 4 qualifications. One of them is like police and fire, which make too much money. The other one is teachers.
Yeah, it's the second tier.
Yeah, and I guess it's the second tier. The third tier is people who, and I'm not quite sure of it, people who live in Mountain View already and people who work in Mountain View already. And certainly some of the second tier, those other 2 tiers are other employees. So I don't know. I don't know.
So can I hear from the other trustees your opinion about?
Sure. I have a quick question. Thank you, Madam President. So following up on that train of thought, is there if there's a distinction between teachers and staff or teachers and whomever, how does that impact funding or how does that impact the package?
Yeah.
If there's any impact, what is it? If there's not, then
We would disaggregate the data out so that we would have it by unit, right? So if it was classified staff, we would want to know about classified certificated staff. We want to know. I guess the question is, I just want to make sure when we did the first survey, we sent it out to everyone. And so we can break it out and we can create it so that we can find out by group. I just want to make sure that we're comfortable with doing that. And, we can always follow up at a later date to say who the true intent of this is for. Is it for all employees? Is it just for teachers? We can answer that question later. I just want to make sure we're comfortable with this will go out to all staff and it will survey the needs and we'll get information across all boards. Or it can, if that's what we choose, simply go out to teachers.
I'm comfortable without
Excuse me.
all staff.
You already
Trustee
gave your
Nelson.
opinion on this.
Trustee Gutierrez, what's your?
so having said that, then I would appreciate it if you could just send it generally to everyone so that we could get specifics.
Okay.
Okay, and Trustee Lambert?
All employees, please.
Okay.
Same here.
Yeah, sure. That's
Okay.
fine.
All right.
Trustee Nelson?
I already gave that.
You gave it twice.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. All right, moving on to item D. Are you still up here?
Yes, I am.
Strategic
I am back
plan
again.
update.
All right, so now we're going to talk about the strategic plan. And the purpose of this one is to talk about sort of what we've done so far and to talk about what the goals possibly are based off of everything that we've compiled and that we've sort of walked away with. So first, let me talk about what we've done. So let's look at this by the numbers. So we had 107 people that were registered, and we know that more showed up. We had 170 people involved in 7 active planning sessions, and we had 6 stakeholder groups attend. So students, parents, community members, partners, corporate sponsors, administrators, right, classified staff. And on top of that, for those individuals that could not come, we administered our LCAP survey, which captured some of the same information. And this year we had a resounding response rate of 2,890, which is more than half of our group. So I want to commend our team, Kathy Bauer, for doing that. Her team actually inputted the paper ones for Spanish. So we had a pretty good turnout across all groups in terms of the response. And then we also had a group of parents whose kids were not registered in school and currently in preschool who wanted to participate in the actual LCAP survey, but couldn't because they had to have a student enrolled. And so they emailed us their responses, and we sent that on to the strategic, the consultants that we're currently using. So all in all, we've probably had over 3,000 individuals in our district who have kids engaged in this actual process. And if you think about that for a second, it's about 60% return rate. That's pretty good. And you know, I don't know what it was in years past, but I'm pretty impressed by that. So
Weren't as many digits in the number prior to year, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Even more impressive though was that the leadership team, which is just is phenomenal to work with them. 39 meetings over 6 weeks, and we're talking about ELAC at every single school. We're so in Spanish and in English. We the PTAs. We went out to every single school site and did it with the staff. So it was a lot of, we did it with the district office. A lot of individuals heard about the work that we were doing. And so our administrators did a phenomenal job of making sure that this message got out. And I don't know how many meetings were done, but what I do know is that we were all pretty tired of talking about the strategic plan and this presentation afterwards. So we probably set too high of a bar the first time out, but that's pretty good. And even more important, 13 companies participated in our event, including Synopsys, Microsoft, 2 people from NASA, Veritas was here, LinkedIn, the YMCA, CSMA, CHAC, as well as the MV Library. So we had a lot of corporate businesses that were a part of this process also. And sort of just to refresh us, because I know we all went through, we spent 2 days working on the strategic plan and talking about where do we want to go into sort of the designing to the edges. And so that information sort of created 6 buckets that I want to talk about, or 5 buckets, 5 big buckets, what I think are the goals that we would like to pursue. And so this is where I'm looking for feedback to see if this is actually the route we want to go. And I'm going to talk about each one of these. So these big buckets are student achievement, the achievement gap, culture, human capital, and resource management. And so let me talk about each one. When we talk about student achievement, we're talking about the whole picture. We're talking about every single kid. We're talking about, if we want to improve STEM, we're talking about STEM for everybody, right? When we're talking about GATE programs, we're talking about the student achievement. When we're looking at what do we do for our middle of the road kids, for lack of a better word, we're talking about student achievement. So this is the overall school program for all of our kids. If we want to do blended learning in order to improve achievement, this is where that will fall. If we want to do make sure that the students are A through G ready, are in Algebra 1 by the time they hit 8th grade, this falls under student achievement. When we talk about summer school, it can fall under either student achievement and an achievement gap. And this is where some of that nuance will come in, right? Because the achievement gap is specific goals that apply to specific groups of kids. And we know that we have 3 populations that are really struggling: Latino, EL learners, and our students with disabilities. So these are specific programs that we put in place to increase the student performance for those 3 groups. Now, it is possible that the achievement gap could be wrapped in to student achievement. It's also possible to simply say the achievement gap is such a concern for this district that while we focus on student achievement, we also want to have a different goal for closing the achievement gap. And so those are 2 distinct things, because there may be different strategies that fall. And it's possible that strategies will sort of overlap, but strategic targeting of a particular group of kids is also important in order to close the achievement gap. The next one is culture. Culture deals with community engagement, student attendance, bullying, it's faculty engagement, it's satisfaction surveys, it's how do we feel when we go into it. It's the organization as a whole looking at different measures. Discipline programs fall under culture. So culture is culture sensitivity that came up in one of the conversations. Are we cognizant of the differences that our students bring to us that come from different countries? Are we aware of the biases that we have, and do we address those? Are we culturally sensitive to them? The next one is human capital. That's professional development, that's evaluations, that is onboarding, offboarding, that is how we focus on the people who do the day-to-day operations and how we improve them. And the last one, which is an important one, is resource management. It is being transparent about the budget, which we do a great job of doing. It is about the building, it's making sure we have a plan of action. It's about the resources, making sure teachers have items on the first day so that they're ready to go. It's about alignment. It's about the working environment. How do places look? So it's the catch-all for the other stuff that takes place in our district that's sort of behind the scenes. So based off of everything that we heard in the meetings, the consultants and I sat down and said, these seem to be the 5 big bins that sort of emerged out of there. And I want to keep us at a 10,000 foot level, right? I don't want us to go down and start talking about specific things that we want to do, because that's actually going to come later. The question now that I'm posing to you, are these the 5 areas that you would like our strategic plan to be aligned around? Are these the 5 goals, or is there something else that you feel needs to be there? And the last thing I'll say before I turn it over to you is a simple one of, remember, the best organizations in the world only focus on 3 to 5 goals. So what I would say is that if we add something, we probably will need to subtract something else, because what we don't want to do is have 10 goals out there and sort of run ourselves thin and sort of be a jack of all trades, master of nothing.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to do the same thing I did last time, except I'm going to start with Trustee Lambert. So 2 minutes feedback to what you just heard.
Ellen,
Yes?
we have a lot of time to work on this, and this is starting up for a 5-year plan. So at times, Dr. Lambert has said, gee, 2 minutes, I've barely gotten into what I want to say. And we're early in the meeting.
So what we have done in the past, when people had more than, there is more to say after the first round, we go to a second round or a third round. I would like to start with a first round and 2 minutes. And also remember that Superintendent Rudolph said this is the first of many conversations that we're going to have about this in
Right.
presentations.
But I would like us to have a deep conversation, since we have never done this in the last 10 years in this district. So
I'm
if
asking.
Dr. Lambert ends up having to say what he wants to say in 2 minutes, great. Okay.
Or
Well-
2 + 2 + 2 + 2.
But having a conversation in 2-minute pieces like that is kind of absurd, and I'd like to have our board move away from that as soon as we can. City council people speak their mind, and then somebody else talks. I remember Mr. Lambert one time had to have 5 turns to read the thing he brought, and that was a shame. And if somebody has something that's a more complex thought, I think it'd be great if they could say it without getting beeped.
So
I don't usually interject in procedural discussions, but yes, I agree. It's not an ideal. In fact, it's an embarrassment to our school board, and it's a disservice to the public who listens to us. Nevertheless, because of the way this board has behaved over the last several years, we have come about adopting this method to manage our board meetings. That has turned out to be the most effective way of doing it. It's not ideal, but that's what we have.
Oh, we could do it for 5 minutes.
So I'd
what
like
I-
to get on the more substantive
yes,
stuff.
I would too. Trustee Lambert?
Could you give us an idea of what some of the other topics, general ideas were discussed between you and the staff and the facilitators, so we could get a sort of an idea of what else was on the table?
These actually were the top 5. I mean, this is
Ma-
once we hit these, it was done. It was that was what we sort of felt like.
Yeah.
There was an interesting conversation about the achievement gap, because we sort of felt like it could be a separate plan of action that doesn't necessarily fall under the strategic plan, or it could be an actual part of the strategic plan. And we felt like it was such an important thing that it should. One of the tendencies when we're talking about the big buckets is to immediately go to things like, we want to do blended learning, or we want to do this. And so we had to continue to ramp ourselves back up and say, what does this really fall under, and how do we sort of categorize that? So our conversation, these were the first 5 that came up. And then we felt like this really encompasses everything that was sort of talked about. And then the meat of it starts coming a little bit later, including things like the portrait of a graduate. We talked about that, the mission and vision, and those types of things. So we discussed those things, but this was it. These were the big 5.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. And so my question, I'm pleased to see that this is the first result of these meetings, and I agree with these 5 things. I'd be interested to know, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, are these 5 things what comes up in, almost every school strategic plan, or was this, somewhat specific to our district?
Yeah. So what you tend to get is a little different iterations of this. One of the big ones that doesn't normally come up, and Dr. Clark mentioned this one in the meeting, is resource management is often one that is left off. Oftentimes what most districts do is they focus a lot on the students, which is important. And then they focus on the teachers, right? And what they forget is the backbone of the organization, which are the resources, the buildings, the supplies, the materials. And so that one was brought to our attention, and we wanted to make sure that we capture that. But oftentimes you will see at least the 3 of them. So you will see a student achievement one. The achievement gap tends to fluctuate depending on the need of a district, right? So some just like to incorporate it in, and they will have like under the student achievement, they'll have 5 or 6 goals, and one of them will be closing the achievement gap. And then some districts like to single this one out because it's such a dire need of the district to close the achievement gap. But culture and human capital, student achievement, culture, human capital are always the 3 that you see. And then from there could be something else that may come up, but those are the biggest 3. Resource management, I think, just considering the landscape, the things that we're doing, the things that we'll need to do in the future, that's sort of an important one I thought that needed to be added. And I don't think there's any debate, at least from my conversations with everyone, that's the achievement gap is an important goal also. If you want to condense it, that's fine. I would argue that, and I think we're in sync in this one, just from my one-on-ones with each one of you. This is a clear direction or a clear goal that we want to be included. So
Yeah, so I'll add, so I said, I
It's
I
2
agree
minutes,
with you.
Ellen.
It's 2 minutes of my talking. It's not
Oh,
2 minutes
we
of
don't.
interaction with the superintendent.
I
So-
wish you would keep it to 2 minutes.
You could get it on the next round.
You can get it on the
No.
next round, Ellen.
2 minutes is trustee speaking for 2 minutes. It's
Well, we
not
didn't-
2 minutes, including any
Ah,
response by the person that we question.
But we're not timing anymore, so
That's correct.
how are
And
we going to know when your time's up?
I'm going to say 2 sentences, Greg.
I'm just saying, it's not
One
following the
is-
process.
This
forth.
is the
Let
way
him
I've
say- let him
done
say
the
2
meetings
sentences.
for a year,
Kathy,
Greg. This is,
just can you? I'm sorry. Next time, just pause it when
Yeah.
when they stop talking.
that's a good
so
idea.
That way, is that possible?
We don't run into this.
All right, we'll try.
So,
Technology.
what I wanted to say is, so I agree with the 5 things. And 2, one reason to have the trustees attend these meetings is for us to see what's going on and then be able to, when we see the report, that it seems accurate to us. So my impression of the meetings that I went to, these are what people were talking about. So, so not only am I personally in favor of these, I think that's what I saw in the meetings. Trustee Coladinato.
These all make sense to me. Achievement gap and student achievement are so close that I didn't realize what the effect of, like, does having its own bullet make achievement gap more likely to get addressed? And if so, that's fine. But otherwise, like you said, they're 2 sides of the same coin or something, and it's
Yeah.
like one situation. Every student's going to do
Correct.
great, and
Correct.
so that'll be our goal. So yeah, this looks like a good list. I couldn't think of anything. I cross-referenced it with our strategic goals over there. I didn't really see anything that was big that was over there that wasn't over here. So
Okay.
Stay the course.
All right, thanks.
Trustee Nelson.
Thanks. Yeah, I actually do see the difference, like you did, between the achievement gap and the student achievement. And I think the way you explained it made a lot of sense to me, and it matches the way at least I'm thinking. So the achievement gap is things like, gee, if Castro wants to have an extended day, that needs some resources, and it needs to be handled a certain way, and it needs to be made sure it's done that way. And our other turnaround school, if that works also. These are Title I schools. They're getting extra money. They also have the highest unachievement, you might call, in the district. So and the things that were mentioned, the extended day is one thing. I'm big on summer learning at those 2 schools. That's another thing. How it's done, that's different than, for instance, GATE would be done. So it's different than how blended learning. So I do see it as separate. And I actually think it's number 1. And I think number 2 is student achievement. Everybody together, looked at together. So I look at, like, we're trying to get like 65% proficient or above. That means everybody in there. And STEM and blended learning, and everybody's in there. So you look at the median kid, is a median kid now meeting academic performance standard? The median kid, all, the higher achievers and the under one. So blended learning, differentiated learning, stuff like that gets put into this general student achievement stuff. But there's other stuff we do. And I think the achievement gap, as we've seen from other things, is in Northern California is worse than it's in Southern California. It's not that great in our district. So we need to address that as number 1, and number 2, at similar kinds of things, but different, is the student achievement. And human capital, I would put as 3rd. It's how we do it. Culture, yeah, La Raza, Cosmica, how we are united culture. And
Time's up.
it needs resources. How we keep track of resources and allocate them.
This wasn't an order on the list. I'm sorry.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, no, to me, the achievement gap,
Time's up.
I understand why.
Okay.
So as I said, if people have us, do you want to do this? Oh, trustee Gutierrez, I always forget that when I start with you and then
Oh,
I
he
move
gets
it
to
down.
talk
Yeah,
as
trustee
well?
Gutierrez.
Already, you're
You
out of
get
there,
your
kid. You're
turn.
gone.
Yeah.
No, thank you. So I like what I see here, Superintendent. I think that there is a distinction that needs to be made between both student achievement and the achievement gap for obvious reasons. But more importantly, because it goes to the issue of accountability. And as board members here, we're accountable to everyone and to the needs of the students. But we need to measure that. We need to have something tangible. If that's listed separately, it should be, in my opinion. I won't go into rankings because I'm fine with how it's presented.
Okay.
Because the bottom line is that after attending the meetings and having listened to parental contributions of their opinions and what they're thinking, not just now, but for the future, along with teachers and other stakeholders, you get a sense of an awareness even more that there's an urgent need to have this written down so that we can be clear with what we want to achieve and so that we can be accountable every step of the way of whether or not we're making that happen or not. If we don't have that be visible for everyone, then the message is mixed, it's confused, there's no coherency, and there's a vacuum of leadership. These people here, though we have different perspectives on things, we have that leadership to come together to make this happen with your support and with the community. And so by listing this out, it brings us to a different stage of leadership now. It brings us to a stage of identifying an issue, problem solving together so that we can get to the next level of accountability and success, not just for the students, but for the district, for our teachers, for the administration, for the board. And we're moving in the right direction and we're doing that together.
Thank you. So now I'll say what I was going to say, which is if people want to have a second turn, that's fine. So trustee Lambert.
No additional comments.
So no additional comments from me.
No
Trustee-
additional comments from me.
Okay, trustee Nelson.
Of course. Actually, one of the things I want to mention is when you're asked to be a candidate, you get a chance to do a ballot statement. And one of the things I noticed in my ballot statement was issues. First, community input to the standards of our city. And you know what I want to say? I've never been to any city function that we've had, including whether we're going to put stop signs on my street or increase the playground, where there was more than 50% response of the stakeholder groups to this. So I'm sort of blown away. It's like, whoa, we're doing it to better than the standard of our city in terms of our response from our stakeholder groups. That's fantastic. So if you guys were really busting your rear ends or whatever you were doing, it's because you're really going for a very high standard. I thought the city was the standard by which others are judged. Now, when I go to the city, I'm going to say, look, the standard is now 60% of your stakeholder groups responding to your, we've upped the standard in this community. If I'll have to check those numbers, percentages for things like this. So when they're going to put a new park in somewhere or do change traffic on Castro, or it's amazing. So I want to let you know, it's one of the things that I wanted to be in office for, and you're giving it to me. But more, you're giving it to the community. And it's not just you, it's your team.
It's the team.
Your
They're the
administration
ones that
team.
pulled this off.
So thank you for
So that's-
listening to
that
us.
goes to
That
them.
we sometimes get beat on that we spend too much time getting community input for this and that. Even our new trustee has sometimes got us a little bit, why did it take so long? Sometimes that's why it takes long.
Thank you.
Yes, okay.
Yep. So just a couple of things. Next board meeting, I'll bring back some more updates about sort of where we are. We do have a community session on the 6th, and it's an all-day session. So we've already sent out invites to the community members. What we will need to find out at some point is how many board members are attending, because it is an all-day process. If 3 of you attend, then we need to agendize the meeting on April 6th. So if you could just shoot me an email and let me know.
Is it
if
a
you,
daytime meeting?
yes, it starts at 8:30 and I think it ends at 3:30. And then there's an evening session also from 5:30 to I think 7 or 8. But it's just a matter of knowing if 3, and you can just shoot me an email to say that you plan on attending. So that way we know, Kathy and I'll know whether or not we have to agendize it.
What's that date?
April 6th. It's a Wednesday. It's a Wednesday before our board meeting on the 7th. There is a night meeting too. And I will say this, I will report out at the April 7th meeting. So what occurred, and we'll discuss the process there also. So just so you know, if you can't attend, you'll at least get the information the next day about the process, the meeting, what took place, where we are, and you'll continue to get board updates, and I'll continue to bring things back for you to look at, to get feedback on as we move forward. But I just want to toss those dates out there. And that's really it.
Madam President, I have a quick question, Superintendent. So in terms of the subject matter for both the day and evening sessions, that'll be the same? There'll be no difference?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
All right.
So what we're going to start doing is the most important part. So these aren't destinations, right? These are the buckets by which we're going to go. And then what we'll need to do is we'll need to start setting destination points. Where is it that we're trying to go? So we'll start talking about strategies. And then we'll start talking about metrics and the goals, so by what % do we want to close the achievement gap by 2021, right? So that's going to sort of come out. But the next thing is to talk about what are the strategies that we have. And this is also part of the reason why some of our business partners are going to be in there, so that they can participate and say, well, we can do this, right? We can be a part of this process. And we can support it in this way. So that the next one's about strategies. And then after that, it continues to get meat on the bones, for lack of a better word, right? And then eventually you'll have the full body.
Okay, thank you. So I think that ends the main part of the meeting for tonight. We'll move on to board updates. Trustee Nelson?
Yeah, I went to backwards to the other thing, to the meeting down at Google that was continuation of the thing for school gardens. I also I met with somebody who was from the Stevenson community, and he gave me a rather large description of a community meeting they had February 5th that explains what kind of things they're thinking about for their facility and how it works with their program based on the input of 130, it's done the Stevenson way. 130 families were represented, and they do stickies on charts of what kind of things we want for multi-use rooms and libraries and sharing and stuff. If the rest of the board doesn't have that, I would suggest you ask somebody at Stevenson how to get it, because I'm not going to send it to you, okay? Because I don't really know where it originally came from. But there is a document going around that way, and there was a big community meeting from them. So some of the stuff that this parent talked to me about and I saw in this thing takes away some of the worries that I thought we might have had about what was going on. But so that was very significant for me. And I can't remember the third thing, but I'll send it in.
I sent in a list of all my outreach activities to the executive secretary. I have no further comments this time.
Yes, and I sent in my list, but I want to add one, Ms. Lilga. So if you want to add this right here. Some of us attended the annual Santa Clara County School Boards Association legislative brunch.
Yeah. Thank you, Ellen.
And one reason why I bring that up is that this is the time of year when legislators are crafting bills and they want to hear from constituents. The bills are just starting to get out. So, I'm hoping that we're all going to follow all these and, we'll see how that goes. But we had a good turnout from our board. We had a good turnout from our local legislators. So, I can highly recommend this event for our trustees in future years. Trustee Lamb.
No updates.
I'll send an update tonight. Thank you.
All right, items for future agendas. We've got, it says the majority of the board has requested an agenda item for the following: study of Latino student achievement. And that's Dr. Rudolph and Trustee Gutierrez. That's working along, that's moving along.
I have a quick question about that. In terms of calendaring,
Mhm.
I'm thinking the second date in May would work, but I'm not sure how that falls in line with the subjects that are being fine. Okay. So if we could target that date, that would be great.
Yeah, yes, go ahead.
The second
So-
date in May or May 2nd?
Oh, no, the second meeting. That
Oh,
we have
okay,
in May.
okay.
Okay,
Thank you.
and then,
And just on that line, I know I mentioned this in my one-on-one with Trustee Gutierrez Jr., but and it's going to be in my weekly, on the 19th of April, we're having a visit to Oak Grove to look at their EL program. So if, I know he's planning on attending.
When is that again?
April 19th. But if more than three of you want to attend,
More than two of us.
if two of you want to go, then fine. But if three of you want to attend, or 4 or 5, you're more than welcome to come. I'm not trying to limit it. I would
Mhm.
love for you all to be there, but we just need to know because we would have to agendize it.
I'm-
So
Okay,
you
thank
can
you.
you can send out an email too. It'll be in my weekly though.
okay,
That will come out to just say
Um,
like if you're interested, let me know.
Actually, I think there's a little bit of kink in how the Brown Act works. We're not allowed to have a meeting outside the district unless we're doing something like interviewing somebody. So I might have been interested in going, but I'll not go if Greg's going. We can't have a meeting outside the district, and you can't have a traveling meeting
Well, then how did you, Chris Chang and I all go to Catherine Smith at the same time?
because somebody else was running it.
Well, then
that's. not-
somebody else can run
that's-
this.
No,
Okay, then we can all go, and
Which
it
is-
doesn't have to be agendized.
Superintendent
It
Manzo, he'll be running it.
Okay,
Jose.
that's how.
That's
so
fixed.
can I say I would?
But
be
it was
much-
open to, it has to be open to, the other difference, that was open to the public, Greg. It has to be an event that's open to the public. Anyway, I'll talk to Rudy about it independently, and if I think I shouldn't go, I won't go, okay?
Okay, so 2 other things are happening right now. One is I'd like to ask if anybody's going to propose an item for future agenda.
I have 2 things to ask about.
Okay, and then also Trustee Nelson, you had mentioned to me that you potentially wanted to bring up an item that you had mentioned before to make your case about, having it be a future agenda. And then if 3 or more of us agree with that item, then we would place it on the future agenda. So do you want to make your case
Right,
tonight?
right.
or
Now
you
there's
wanna wait?
discussion.
Do you want to wait until a different meeting?
I would like to make it now.
Okay.
We're
so
not
go ahead.
running over budget.
So does everyone understand the new process? All right. So, and I think what we said is 2 minutes. You get to make your case for 2 minutes.
No, I don't remember that.
Get set. Yeah.
Anyway, the issue was insurance for our uninsured, what will be 170 million in the county treasury, to discuss if we want to do that or go out for RFQ. The facts are in 1993, San Diego County had a 27 drop in their pool of investment. In 1993, Santa Clara County had some of the funds invested in that San Diego County thing, and we lost whoever had funds in their accounts in this county also lost some money. And in 2011, 12 San Mateo County school districts lost money, and they sued together trying to get their investments back that the county had done. It turned out San Mateo Unified High School District lost getting any money back at the appellate court level because it said the county was immune from any liability of how they manage their investment account. So our last auditor noted that the county pool is uninsured and subject to investment loss. So the question is I'd like a report of if we can get some quotes on an insuring against loss of millions of these, both reserves and bond monies that we will be having in there. So I'd sort of like a report from the,
Yeah, so this might be an example of what we talked about at our board retreat, which is
no,
something.
Ellen, it's not a board retreat issue. It's an issue for a
Stephen, will you
5-minute
let me
report.
finish my sentence?
Good idea.
Which was that some things that the board is interested in can come to us just as
Oh,
reports,
yeah.
and some of them should be agenda items. So my question is, would you be satisfied if Dr. Clark prepared a report for us and distributed it?
I think that's part of what putting it on the agenda does. Says he does a report of however long he thinks he needs to. It gets put in the agenda item. We have it on the agenda for 10 minutes. We'll have read the report and then we can discuss it.
So
may-
this is,
So I would like it
so I'd like to,
agendized.
okay,
Yeah.
so not just a report that we receive, but something that would be in an agenda. So now.
For instance, we could even put it in as a report in the consent items. And then if we decide if somebody wants to pull it and discuss it, we can do it that way.
Okay, so I'm going to call for a vote. So you have asked for this to be an agenda item.
Which means it could be in the consent agenda also. If you didn't understand what I just said.
I did understand what you just said, Trustee Nelson. Okay, so all in favor, say aye. Okay, the motion fails. It was just Trustee Nelson. But I would like to say that it looked like Dr. Clark would be willing to prepare a report like this and distribute it to us. And am I misinterpreting what you were?
If it
kind
comes
of
up in the weekly,
signaling,
that's another way to do it.
Yeah,
right?
Dr.
Yeah.
Clark, what's your opinion of this?
I think the first thing I would ask is, what's the RFP for? We're looking for another place to invest our funds?
No, we can't do that. The RFP was if we go out, what kind of mechanism would we had to go out and buy insurance?
So basically what we're trying to do is keep our funds at the county.
We have
but-
to
but-
legally, I think.
No, you don't.
We don't?
No, you don't. But you need a financial manager to come do that work. So you don't have to invest in the county. You can go elsewhere. But
Oh.
our funds stay at the county. You're looking for the district to put out an RFP to look for essentially an insurance broker to cover our deposits at the county treasury.
Yeah.
So it's not a report. You're asking me to put together a request for proposals to go out to the community.
How you would do a request for proposal or what it would look like or
So it's.
how would we buy insurance? Maybe RFQ is wrong. How would you buy insurance to insure against that? The kind of losses that the 12 district in San Mateo just ate.
Well, those 12 districts in San Mateo ate that loss because of the recession in the United States. It was the Lehman Brother loss. I was part of that. I remember that very well.
Right.
So
They were not insured against that loss, and so they lost it.
right. So the idea is that if the majority of the board is requesting, essentially, I go out and research how we would purchase, procure insurance for an uninsured deposits at the county treasury.
So,
Is that what I hear
So,
now?
yeah, sort
So-
of. If it's been done anywhere, I mean, obviously nobody's interested in insuring that. So if you want to do it as a favor to me and put it in a weekly, if you can do it in half hour or whatever your boss thinks appropriate. I hate to have 170 million out there uninsured. Though I'm sure we couldn't lose that much.
If my boss directs me to do the work, I would be happy to do that work.
Right, okay.
But I would come back to my boss and question
Oh,
the need for
absolutely.
me spending time to put together a document
Um,
for one board member. Because that's not
That's
something
fine.
I can just whip out.
okay, so I would like to move on. The motion failed. So Trustee Coladonado, you had two items that you wanted to bring up.
Yes, in your weekly last week, Dr. Rudolph, you asked the board for clarification related to target enrollment size at neighborhood schools. You told me in our one-on-one that you'd you have it agendized for April 7th, but since then, have you already found the clarification you needed from the minutes or the video or anything? Do we need to have that on that agenda, or can we not even, if you already have what you need, do we skip it?
The decision was a 3-2 vote on December 10th for a size of 450. The question would be, when does that take effect?
I would like to have it on the agenda because, for instance, I learned something from this Stevenson group that I hadn't heard before. And we never really talked about the choice schools, if there was something different. Is that your understanding? I mean, it's just a 450 number, right?
The 450 was for neighborhood schools.
Correct.
And we never really talked about.
Like when to put it into effect? That's what you're talking about.
Just
Okay.
And
Sounds like it'll be on that agenda.
is it going to be on that agenda?
Oh, well, you still have an outstanding question.
I went back and looked at the minutes.
You answered that part. And then you said, the question is, when does it apply? How soon does it? All right. What was that?
Yeah,
Good
so
song.
every year we have a discussion about capacity at schools. And so we could roll that into that question about capacity.
Is it still coming? Is that discussion for
That,
this year
that
still?
is on April 7th.
Ah, okay.
But we do that annually every year, I believe, correct? Yes.
okay, but
Required.
we can, because what's I've seen happen. Do I have the floor?
Yes.
Sorry.
Thank you for asking.
I need to do that sometimes, guys. What I've seen happening, sometimes that has happened so late in the year that it actually doesn't get discussed. Say, here's what it is, here's it. So this time we'll be purposefully looking at strategic issues, not making final decisions or anything, but giving guidance to the staff of, is that sort of?
I
what-
think the capacity is an action item.
Capacity isn't something you have to approve. You set capacity for the schools for the year.
Just for 1 year, but, okay,
But it's kind of a different thing than setting capacity for the new improved.
Oh, I see.
well, what I'm talking about, we have to do it for a year, okay? But at some point, we've never talked about, had more discussion on the strategic plan for the long term. And so you're going to roll that into this discussion that we approve it for a year.
No, so the capacity is something that we do.
School size,
When
I mean, what do you
we-
mean?
The direction that the student area attendance task force will take is to set every neighborhood school as close to 450 as possible.
Okay,
That was the directive that was given on December 10th.
Correct.
So,
Now-
and I disagree. I disagree with that interpretation, and I've sent you email about this. I think it's so maybe it's worth discussing in an open meeting what everyone's common understanding of this is.
I think it's worth discussing in a common meeting too. I don't necessarily think we're going to come to the exact same agreement, but there's the ability to disagree. And
Ellen, have you reviewed the item from December 10th in the video? Because I think it'd be pretty clear if you did.
It has never been my understanding for attending every single one of these meetings that our rock solid goal is 450 student schools. So if I having attended every single one of these meetings, am unsure what the intention of this district is regarding school size, I think it's worth, and it's a question I hear when I'm out and about in the public, I think it's worth discussing this in the public board meeting.
yes, I do too.
Which every one of these meetings? are you
Every
referring to?
single one of our board meetings, I attended the boundary task force. I think there's a lot of confusion out in the public, and I attend PTA meetings where this is asked. There's a lot of confusion out in the public about, what size schools we're talking about.
I think there's confusion too, and part of it is I don't think the board is given good strategic direction. And I don't think the board has given clear strategic direction. And I don't think when we've made those motions that we've made it clear what it is we mean and what parameters we mean. That's why we have discussion. And that's why we do things over the longer term. I tend to agree with Greg is, yeah, we're not saying 650 student schools.
Anyways, Trustee Lambert, you looked like you had something to say. So Dr. Rudolph, will this be part of the discussion at the April meeting?
It seems like that's what's being requested. I just,
Okay, thank you. So Trustee
I see
Cullen,
two.
By two,
Oh, two. Okay.
I think this was settled.
Well, wait, there's two. We could discuss it and we're not going to vote on.
Let's not,
I mean,
but we shouldn't waste time on things. we
What
already
I
discussed.
would say is essentially what you're doing is you're agendizing a topic. So you would need 3 votes in order to re-agendize it unless the president and I want to bring it back. So it would have to fall under one or two ways. Whether the board requests it or whether President Wheeler and I want to bring it back up,
Right.
It's one of those 2 formats that would take place.
Just a thought, I do want to comment. So we're about ready to launch a couple of task force, a facilities task force and the
Student
what is-
attendance area.
Student,
task force.
thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, yeah, another task force. Clearly what the objectives of those task force will depend in part on what school size is targeted, I believe. I believe that's not a discussion that they will have.
They'll be given
I
direction.
think,
I think.
yeah,
You're trying to get Dr.
Yeah,
Rudolph to listen to
yeah,
you.
I'll wait a moment, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, we're fact checking here.
I got it, yeah.
Sorry, sorry about that.
Yeah.
But I heard you. We're giving direction to task force to set boundaries and
not the other way, not that the task force will look at where we are with the district and then understand how we're going to juggle it around. We sort of, okay. So in that regard, it's really important then that we have that clear understanding and give direction so that the task force can do their jobs efficiently.
so we went back to the minutes. And a motion was made by Mr. Nelson that the eventual capacity of the school be 450 students. It actually died for lack of a second.
This was a question asked by Dr. Clark, not a motion made by a board member. And we went down the line and Dr. Clark asked and we double clarified exactly what the direction was. It wasn't a motion
What was the
situation.
action? What was the agenda item on that?
So this was this all came with the whether to open Slater, and then there was a second one. I hate to do this one on the fly, right, or right on the spot.
Right.
But
I think it was in
but it was
relation
with-
to whether Slater should be 450.
That's what your motion was.
Yeah.
And that
all
did
of
not
them.
pass.
Okay. And then there was another one, which we'll have to look for, which was Dr. Clark specifically asking, as it related to construction, about the size of schools. And that one was about 450. We can continue to look.
Was that an action item by the board to vote on that?
No.
Okay,
It
then
was-
it can't have been voted on and we can't have taken action because it has to be agendized as an action item if we're going to take binding action. It can't be during the discussion.
Dr. Clark, did you want to say something?
The only thing we've had is that item. It was December 10th. I remember that board meeting very well. And it was a review and discussion and direction. We were seeking the board's direction on many topics. There were a lot of facilities questions that led us from Slater to the idea of moving forward for future construction in the district. And one of those questions was size, 450 to 600. Staff asked for a range from 450 to 600, knowing that we have a number of schools that are over 450. And we went down the line essentially with all the board members and they gave their opinion. And there was, the majority of the board was 450.
Not 450 to 600.
Not a range.
Right.
Right.
It was very
450.
clear. And so I don't think we
Yes.
should waste time
Yes.
reopening this discussion.
So that's,
And that was only for neighborhood schools. Sorry.
Correct.
so it's my understanding.
Ellen,
Let
her-
me
let her
finish
finish?
what I was
Okay.
going to
Let
say,
her finish.
Trustee Nelson. It's my understanding from many conversations that, for example, Bub School will be larger than 450 students. So that's why I say it's confusing when we say schools will be at 450 when it's my understanding that at least Bub School will be larger than 450, possibly Huff School will be larger than 450. And that's why I don't want that number being out there like it's set in stone and scaring those parents at those two schools. I agree that, a range of, looking at around 450. So Torikoff and Monloma and Landals can be around that number. And we're building our MURs for 450. We haven't had a firm decision on what size we want our choice programs to be. So that's where I just don't, I
Ellen.
want that. Let me finish, Stephen.
Are you being? Okay.
No, we're not timing right now.
How come you're not being timed?
It's great. Actually, let's not time. Don't mention it.
I would like to have a common understanding within our community about size of schools. And I don't think the understanding is that all schools will be 450.
Ellen, you did
Yes.
not get a third vote to put that on. If the superintendent has said you and he, an executive session of how you decide these things, can talk about it and decide what you want to do on an agenda item. But is in terms of the majority of this board and bringing it up this way,
It has failed.
it has failed.
Next item.
Next item.
The second thing I wanted to bring up.
Well, I don't,
was-
do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
What he
we
said
all-
is he
we all
gave you
see
an
what you're
out.
saying. You got it.
He gave you an out.
Right, we got it. So may I do the second one?
Yes.
Second one is in the questions that we submit to the superintendent before each meeting and get answers. I asked a question about if we have or if we plan to survey the parents on the Stevenson or maybe the other waiting list too. I mean, the Stevenson's 129 students, I think, last I checked, much bigger than the other ones.
You mean the wait list?
I don't even know what I said, but I meant the wait list.
wait
Yeah,
list.
the Stevenson wait list is like 129 kids. I would be very interested in knowing what the parents on the wait list, of the different things that happen at Stevenson, which things are most important to them and which of those things we might be able to do at other schools in the district so that if they don't go to Stevenson, maybe they can still get, whether it's project-based learning or more involvement in the classroom or, better field trips or, or whatever they may think that Stevenson has. And
That's what you want to discuss?
well,
This is the one sentence.
yeah, but I'm the one who's supposed to say it, not you. The superintendent responded, if a majority of the board wants that, we can do that. And so this is kind of like a way to find out if there's a majority of the board interested in finding. In prior years, we've had long Stevenson wait lists, and I don't think we've ever found out from them. Besides test scores, that are hard to just copy around, what programs had you interested in Stevenson? And for us to find out if we should start some of those programs at other schools. So
Is there are we still on the part where you want to have items for future agenda? Is that where we are in the
So
meeting?
I would be interested in such a survey, and partly because I think it would be pretty easy to put together and get and find out from parents who are on the wait list.
I would be interested too. And I actually think that the PACT Foundation or the PACT parents or that organization over there can come up with the questions that they would like to ask the parents.
Well, I'd be interested in an expanded survey, not just what PACT
Yeah,
Foundation
I know,
says.
but I mean,
But
that would be a
anyway,
good
so
part
sounds
to-
like there's 3 of us who are interested in that kind of survey.
now it doesn't need to be agendized to
Right.
talk about it again.
Right.
But this is board direction that there's at least 3 of us, maybe
When do you
4 or
want the
5.
survey done?
Yeah, there'll be 4.
Jose's interested too.
Okay, so
Um,
when do you want
You
it?
decide.
Well, the
I
sooner,
just, we're in the process of enrollment right now.
Yeah.
We're not even running demographic reports about the students.
Right.
So when are you requesting this survey to be done? Because it will take some time to do it.
So in an ideal world, we'd find out information like this in time to think about how to use it for next school year,
Next school year.
the 16-17 school year. So if we found out, wow, these parents want project-based learning, then we could have as part of our May and June process, let's have, some project-based, which schools, which principals are interested in doing some of that or more of that. Some schools do and some schools don't. So in time to influence next year's offerings would be ideal. Since these are people
So
with
before
pre-kindergarten.
before the end of this school year.
But not just that, but before the LCAP and strategic plan are, done for the
Right,
year,
yeah.
we could learn if these are 129 people that aren't getting what they want out of our district. And I'd like to find out, is there a way to give them
I'm
something?
going to ask a broader question here. We're asking the staff and the board focusing on 129 parents or students of parents in our district. We have all the other 5,000 students in our district who, really, should we be asking them, what they want? Why are they going to this school? Why aren't they going to another school? I think this is just a tremendous amount of work for 129 students.
The
I hear you.
problem is Trustee Lambert, is these are students that are coming out of, a lot of them are coming out of families that are coming out of Therakoff, a neighborhood school, and coming out of Mauna Loma, a neighborhood school. And so one of the questions is, why is there so much demand of coming out of those neighborhood schools? What is it they say is in the PACT program?
You don't need to say anymore.
I'm
We
very
gave direction.
I'm very aware of where the students
Yeah,
are
we
coming
gave
from.
direction to Superintendent Rudolph. I think he knows what to do. That's the only other thing I didn't have anything to add to that.
A short survey, an easy survey. All right. Any other items for future agendas? Okay. I don't see future board meeting dates on this short
This version. huh?
one that I have. I'm assuming that they're all
Yeah. Yeah, right.
correct.
Yeah.
So I'm going to adjourn at 9:13.
My microphone is on.